The heavy boot slammed into the asphalt, pinning the hooded figure to the ground behind the convenience store. Rain poured down in sheets, turning the alley into a river of grime and regret. "I warned you," Rook growled, his voice like grinding gears cutting through the downpour. He raised a fist the size of a sledgehammer, knuckles scarred from 1,000 fights. "Nobody steals from the club's territory and walks away. You had your chance." The man beneath him didn't fight back. He didn't pull a knife or throw a punch. He just curled into a ball, protecting something against his chest, his body shaking with sobs. "Please, just let me keep it. Please." Rook hesitated. This wasn't how thieves usually acted. The predator in him sensed something wrong, something that didn't fit the pattern. He tightened his grip on the man's collar, preparing to drag him up and get answers. Suddenly, a high-pitched scream pierced through the rain and thunder. "Stop! Please don't hurt my daddy." Rook froze. From behind a dumpster, a tiny girl, no older than 5, ran out. She was shivering in a thin summer dress, completely wrong for the cold autumn night, her bare feet splashing through puddles. Her eyes were wide with terror, fever-bright and glassy. She threw her small body over the man on the ground, spreading her arms as if she could shield him from the giant biker looming above. "Don't hurt him," she sobbed. "Please, mister. He's a good daddy. He's good." Rook's raised fist trembled in the air. The man on the ground opened his jacket with shaking hands. There was no cash, no jewelry, no stolen goods. Just a plastic gallon of milk, the cheap kind, store brand, and a crumpled box of children's Tylenol. The rain continued to fall, but the world had gone silent. 3 hours earlier, Rook had been sitting in the shadows across from Martinez's convenience store, watching, waiting, hunting. The scar on his face, a jagged line from his left eyebrow to his jaw, seemed to pulse with old anger. Elias Rook Vance wasn't just the Grave Walker's MC's enforcer. He was the embodiment of the club's law, the steel edge that kept order in their territory. At 38, he'd seen everything: rival gangs, corrupt cops, desperate junkies. He thought he knew all the types. Martinez had called the clubhouse 2 weeks ago, frustrated and angry. "It's the 4th time this month, Rook. Always the same guy, always at night. Milk, bread, medicine, small stuff, but it adds up. My margins are already thin." The Grave Walkers protected Martinez. That meant Martinez's problems were the club's problems. That meant they were Rook's problems. So he'd been watching, patient as death itself. The convenience store sat on the corner of Blake and Harrison, in the working-class neighborhood the Grave Walkers had claimed as their territory 15 years ago. Not claimed through violence, though there'd been some of that, but through presence. Through being there when the cops weren't. Through making sure the strong didn't prey on the weak. Rook shifted on his Harley, feeling the cold seep through his leather jacket. The engine was off, the bike silent. Around him, the neighborhood slept, tired people in tired houses, working jobs that barely kept the lights on. These were the people the club protected, and someone was stealing from them. At 11:47 p.m., Rook saw movement. A figure in a dark hoodie, moving with the jerky nervousness of someone who knew what they were doing was wrong, but couldn't stop. The predator in Rook came alive. He watched the figure slip around the back of the store, checking the alley both ways before disappearing into the shadows. Rook waited 30 seconds, long enough for the thief to think he was safe, then moved. Silent despite his size, Rook crossed the street. His boots made no sound on the wet pavement. Years of hunting had taught him how to move like smoke, how to become the nightmare that appeared behind you just when you thought you'd gotten away. He rounded the corner of the building and saw the figure crouched by the back door. The lock was broken, had been for weeks. Martinez was saving up to replace it, and the thief was reaching inside, grabbing items from the shelf just inside. 4th time, Rook said quietly, his voice cutting through the rain like a blade. The figure spun, stumbled backward. In the dim light from the street, Rook saw terror in the man's eyes. Good. Fear meant respect. Fear meant this wouldn't happen again. "I told Martinez I'd handle this personally," Rook continued, advancing slowly. The man scrambled backward, clutching something to his chest. "You know what happens to thieves in Grave Walker territory?" I can explain," the man stammered. "You can try," Rook said and lunged. The chase was brief. The man ran, but he was malnourished, weak, desperate. Rook caught him within 20 feet, tackling him to the ground behind the store. The man's hood fell back, revealing a gaunt face, sunken eyes, a scraggly beard that hadn't been trimmed in weeks. Rook pinned him down, knee on his back, ready to deliver the lesson every thief in the territory would hear about tomorrow. His fist was raised, the rain streaming down his leather jacket, when he heard the scream. The little girl. And everything changed. Rook stared at the plastic jug on the ground. It had cracked slightly in the scuffle, a thin white line of milk leaking onto the dirty alley floor, mixing with rainwater and grime. The children's Tylenol box was getting soaked, the cardboard already starting to dissolve. Milk, Rook whispered, the adrenaline draining from his veins, leaving him cold in a way that had nothing to do with the rain. She's hungry. The man, Thomas, Rook would learn later, choked out, wiping blood from his split lip with a shaking hand. He didn't look at Rook. He looked at the girl. She hasn't eaten since yesterday morning. I tried to find work. I swear to God, I tried everywhere. But she's sick, and she needed medicine, and the milk, his voice broke. She loves milk. The little girl, Ellie, was tugging on Thomas's wet sleeve now, her small hands trembling from cold and fever. Daddy, don't cry. I'm not hungry anymore. I promise. Her voice was small, weak, but filled with a child's desperate need to make everything okay. That sentence hit Rook harder than a tire iron to the chest. He looked at his own leather-gloved hands, hands that had broken bones and twisted throttles and delivered justice 100 times. Hands that were about to beat a man for trying to keep his child alive. Slowly, carefully, Rook lowered his fist. He looked at the girl, really looked at her. The summer dress was 2 sizes too small, her arms and legs stick-thin. Her face was flushed with fever, her eyes glassy. She was barefoot, standing in the rain, shielding her father with a body that barely weighed 40 pounds. How old? Rook asked quietly. 5, Thomas whispered. She just turned 5 last month. Rook felt something crack inside his chest, some wall he'd built years ago when the world had shown him too much darkness. He'd seen a lot of evil in his time. Real evil, the kind that hurt people for profit or pleasure. But this wasn't evil. This was desperation. This was what happened when the system failed and left people to drown. He stood up, releasing Thomas. The man immediately pulled his daughter close, wrapping his arms around her as if Rook might change his mind. Get up, Rook said, his voice rough but quiet. He reached down, not to strike, but to offer a hand. Thomas stared at it like it might be a trap. I said get up, Rook repeated. And pick up the milk. You're going to need more than that. Thomas slowly took Rook's hand, letting himself be pulled to his feet. He was lighter than Rook expected, probably hadn't been eating much himself, giving what little he had to his daughter. Rook shrugged out of his leather jacket, his colors, the sacred vest that marked him as Grave Walker, and draped it over Ellie's shoulders. It swallowed her completely, hanging down to her ankles, but it was warm and dry. What's your name? Rook asked. Thomas. Thomas Reed. He paused. This is Ellie. Ellie, Rook repeated, crouching down to her level. Up close, he could see the fever in her eyes, the way her small body shivered despite the jacket. When's the last time you saw a doctor? Ellie looked at her father, uncertain. We don't have insurance, Thomas said quietly. Lost it when I lost my job. I've been giving her children's Tylenol, trying to bring the fever down. But you ran out, Rook finished. He picked up the soaked Tylenol box from the ground. It was generic brand, the cheapest available. He looked at the milk, also generic, half a gallon, not even a full one. The predator in him was gone. In its place was something older, something that remembered what it meant to protect the vulnerable. My bike's across the street, Rook said. Where do you live? I'll give you a ride home. Thomas's face crumpled. We don't have a home right now. Rook went very still. What does that mean? We've been staying in my car, in the lot behind the old factory on Jefferson Street. Thomas's voice was barely a whisper. It's not much, but it's dry, and I've made it as comfortable as I can for her. Rook looked at the little girl again, at her bare feet and summer dress and fever-bright eyes. Something dark and furious began to burn in his chest, not at Thomas, but at whatever circumstances had brought a father and daughter to this point. Show me, Rook said. The '98 Honda Civic sat alone in the corner of the abandoned parking lot, looking as defeated as its owner. Rook pulled his Harley up beside it, the rumble of his engine seeming obscene in the quiet misery of the place. Thomas opened the back door carefully, like he was revealing a shameful secret. But what Rook saw inside wasn't shame. It was love fighting against impossible odds. The back seat had been converted into a makeshift bed. Moving blankets, the kind used to protect furniture, were folded carefully to create a mattress. A pillow with a homemade pillowcase sat at one end. There were books, children's books, probably from the library, stacked neatly in the footwell. A small stuffed rabbit with one ear was tucked carefully in the corner. The front seat was Thomas's space, a change of clothes in a garbage bag, a cooler that probably held whatever perishables they could keep, and a toolbox. A carpenter's toolbox, Rook noticed. Good quality tools, well-maintained despite everything. I know it's not much, Thomas said, his voice thick with shame. But I keep it clean. I make sure she's warm. You're a good father, Rook interrupted, the words coming out harsher than he intended because of the emotion behind them. Don't apologize for doing everything you can. Thomas stared at him, shocked. Rook looked at the window, taped with clear packing tape where a crack had spread. At the passenger door that didn't quite close right. At the inspection sticker that had expired 3 months ago. How long have you been living like this? 2 months, Thomas admitted. After Gower refused to pay me, we lost the apartment. Tried staying at the shelter, but he looked at Ellie, who was already curling up in the back seat, drowning in Rook's jacket. They split up families. Men in one area, women and children in another. I couldn't leave her alone with strangers. Gower, Rook repeated. Marcus Gower? The contractor. Thomas nodded. I did finish carpentry for him. Custom work on one of his luxury developments. 2 months of work. Detailed trim, built-in cabinets. The kind of craftsmanship he advertised to his wealthy buyers. When it came time to pay, he said the work wasn't up to his standards. Said if I made a fuss, he'd report me for. Thomas's voice broke. For things I didn't do? I don't have money for a lawyer. I don't have anything except Ellie. Rook knew Marcus Gower. Everyone in the construction business in this city knew Gower. He was the kind of wealthy predator who wore expensive suits and smiled for charity photos while crushing working people under his heel. The kind of man who used the law as a weapon, knowing people like Thomas couldn't fight back. The kind of man Rook had built his reputation on dealing with. Did you document the work? Rook asked. Thomas looked surprised by the question. Yeah, I take photos. Professional habit. And I have the original contract, even though he said he lost his copy. He reached into the front seat, pulling out a phone with a cracked screen and a folder of papers protected in a Ziploc bag. Rook looked through them. The photos showed beautiful work, intricate crown molding, perfectly fitted cabinets, the kind of detail that took real skill. The contract was clear, 8 weeks of work at $25 per hour, totaling just over $8,000. $8,000 that would have changed everything for this family. Get in the car, Rook said. Follow me. Where are we going? The clubhouse, Rook said, already walking back to his bike. My brothers need to hear this story. The Gravewalkers Clubhouse sat at the end of Industrial Way, a converted warehouse that had been home to the MC for 15 years. Lights spilled from the windows, and Rook could hear music and laughter inside. The brothers relaxing after a long week of work. Most of them had regular jobs, construction, mechanics, warehouse work. The MC was their family, their identity, but it wasn't their only life. When Rook's Harley pulled up with a beat-up Honda Civic following, the music stopped. By the time Thomas parked and got out, carrying a sleeping Ellie wrapped in Rook's jacket, the clubhouse door had opened and 6 large men in leather vests were standing on the porch, watching with wary eyes. Rook, said Jax, the club president. He was a mountain of a man with graying hair and eyes that missed nothing. This the thief you were hunting? No, Rook said simply. This is a father who was trying to keep his daughter alive, and we're going to help him. The wariness didn't leave immediately, but it shifted. These men, these rough, hard men who society judged by their leather and tattoos, knew what it meant to protect family. Bring them inside, Jax said. The clubhouse was warm, almost too warm after the cold rain. Thomas stood in the doorway, uncertain, while Ellie stirred in his arms. The fever had made her restless, causing her to whimper in her sleep. Doc, Jax called. We got a sick kid. From the back room emerged a man in his 50s with a gray beard and gentle eyes. Marcus Doc Sullivan had been a paramedic before retiring, and he still kept his skills sharp. He approached Thomas slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to Ellie. Thomas hesitated, then nodded. Doc took Ellie carefully, laying her on the worn couch by the fireplace. He checked her temperature with a thermometer from his medical kit, kept in the clubhouse for exactly these situations, and frowned. 103.2, he said. "When did the fever start?" 3 days ago, Thomas admitted. "I've been trying to keep it down with Tylenol, but I ran out this afternoon. That's why he couldn't finish." Doc nodded, understanding. He pulled out a bottle of children's ibuprofen and carefully measured a dose, then gently woke Ellie to get her to take it. She was too tired and sick to protest much. "She needs rest, fluids, and probably antibiotics if this doesn't break soon," Doc said. "But she'll be okay." He looked at Thomas. "You did good, keeping her fever managed with what you had." Thomas's legs seemed to give out. He sank into a nearby chair, his hands shaking. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." Jax pulled up a chair across from him while other brothers appeared with food, leftover pizza, a sandwich, a beer. They set it in front of Thomas without comment, without judgment. "Rook says you got a story," Jax said. "I want to hear it." As Thomas ate, clearly trying not to wolf down the food despite his hunger, he told them everything. The 2 months of work for Gower, the beautiful craftsmanship he'd poured into the luxury house, the contract he'd signed in good faith, and then the betrayal, Gower's refusal to pay, his threats, his use of the legal system as a weapon. "He knew I couldn't fight back," Thomas said. "Knew I didn't have money for a lawyer. He does this to contractors all the time, I found out later. Hires them, gets the work done, then finds some excuse not to pay. By the time they could take him to small claims court, they've already lost everything." Rook watched his brothers' faces as they listened. Saw the anger building. The grave walkers MC weren't angels. They'd all done things they weren't proud of. But they had a code, a line they wouldn't cross. You protected the weak. You stood up to bullies. And you never, ever let someone abuse their power to crush working people. "What's this house worth?" asked Rook. "Probably $2 million when it sells," Thomas said. "Maybe more. It's in the Riverside Estates development." Jax leaned back in his chair, a dangerous smile crossing his face. "Rook, you still got that lawyer friend? The one who helped us with the zoning dispute?" "Sarah Chun," Rook confirmed. "She owes us a favor." "Good," Jax said. He looked at Thomas. "Here's what's going to happen. You and Ellie are staying here tonight. Doc's going to keep an eye on the little one. Tomorrow morning, we're going to pay Mr. Gower a visit. And we're going to have a conversation about business ethics." "I don't want trouble," Thomas started to say. "I just want—" "What you want," interrupted Hammer, the club's sergeant-at-arms, "is to feed your daughter and put a roof over her head. What you deserve is the money you earned. And what Gower's going to learn is that stealing from working folks has consequences." Thomas looked around the room at these hard men with their leather and scars and fierce loyalty. "Why are you helping me?" Rook spoke up from where he'd been leaning against the wall. "Because a few hours ago, I almost beat you bloody for stealing a jug of milk to keep your daughter alive. Because the real thief isn't you. It's the man who put you in that position. And because that," he pointed to Ellie, sleeping peacefully now with the fever medicine working, "is what we're supposed to protect." The next morning, Rook and 3 other brothers rode out to Riverside Estates. It was a beautiful fall day, the kind that made the previous night's rain seem like a bad dream. The development sat on the west side of the city, where old farmland was being converted into luxury homes for the wealthy. They parked their bikes on the public street outside the main construction site and just watched. Observed. Marcus Gower arrived at 10 a.m. in a Mercedes S-Class, its black paint gleaming. He was 50, well-groomed, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Thomas's car. He moved with the confidence of a man who'd never faced real consequences, who believed his money and lawyers made him untouchable. He was wrong. Rook watched as Gower walked through the construction site, pointing out flaws to a foreman who looked exhausted. From their vantage point, they could see Thomas's work in the nearest completed house, the detailed crown molding, the custom cabinets. It was beautiful, the kind of craftsmanship that would be featured in the sales brochures. "That's a $25 an hour job," muttered Hammer sarcastically. "That's master-level work. Should have been paid double, minimum." "Which is why Gower didn't want to pay at all," Rook said. He'd seen this pattern before. Rich men who saw working people as tools to be used and discarded, who got richer by stealing from those who couldn't fight back. They watched for 2 hours, gathering information. Saw the other contractors working, good men doing honest work, probably wondering if they'd actually get paid. Saw Gower make calls on his phone, laughing, confident. Enough reconnaissance, Jax finally said. Let's go talk to Sarah. Sarah Chin's law office was modest but professional. She'd helped the grave walkers navigate legal issues before, zoning disputes, business permits, the occasional criminal charge that needed defending. She was smart, ruthless, and she believed in justice. Marcus Gower, she said when they explained the situation, her expression hardening. I know him. He's been sued 17 times in the past 5 years for failure to pay contractors. He settles most of them for pennies on the dollar, just enough to make them go away. The ones who push back. She shook her head. He buries them in legal fees until they give up. Can Thomas win if he sues? Rook asked. Probably, Sarah said. The contract is clear, and the photos prove the work was done to specification. But it would take months, maybe a year. And Gower would drag it out, file motions, appeal everything. By the time Thomas saw $1, he'd have spent everything he had just surviving the process. So legal isn't the answer, Jax said. Legal is part of the answer, Sarah corrected. But you need leverage. Something that makes settling immediately more attractive than fighting. Rook smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. I think we can provide leverage. That evening, the brothers gathered at the clubhouse to plan. Thomas had been given a clean shirt and a hot meal. Ellie was feeling better. Her fever had broken, and she was playing with a donated stuffed animal while the adults talked. Gower's hosting a private event tomorrow, said Keyes, the club's tech specialist. He'd been digging into Gower's social media and business calendar. Big potential investors. He's showing off the Riverside development, trying to get funding for his next project. Perfect, Jax said. Nothing makes a businessman more cooperative than having his reputation threatened in front of money. We're not going to hurt anyone, Rook said firmly. It was important to establish that. This is about justice, not revenge. Agreed, Jax said. We're going to be loud, visible, and completely legal. We're going to stand on public property and make sure everyone at that event knows exactly what kind of man Marcus Gower is. Sarah Chun had provided them with documentation. Copies of the 17 lawsuits against Gower, public records of settlement amounts, testimony from other contractors he'd cheated. All legal, all public information. We make signs, Hammer suggested. Big ones. Gower steals from workers. Ask him about the 17 lawsuits. This house built by stolen labor. And we invite the media, added Keyes. Local news loves a story about rich developers screwing working families. Thomas listened to all this with growing amazement. You're going to do all this for me? Not just for you, Rook said. For every contractor he's cheated. For every worker he's going to cheat in the future. We're drawing a line. Ellie looked up from her stuffed animal. Are you going to help my daddy get his money? Rook crouched down to her level. Yes, sweetheart. We're going to make sure your daddy gets what he earned. Thank you, she said solemnly, then went back to playing. Rook stood up, that burning feeling in his chest again. Not anger now, purpose. This was what the club was supposed to be for. Not just riding bikes and drinking beer, but standing up when someone needed standing up for. Let's make this count, he said. At 2 p.m. the next day, 50 Harley-Davidson motorcycles rolled into the public parking area adjacent to the Riverside Estates development. The thunder of their engines was audible for half a mile. Marcus Gower, who had been showing a group of potential investors around his flagship property, froze mid-sentence. Through the windows of the model home, he could see the parking lot filling with leather-clad bikers, their motorcycles arranged in perfect formation. What the hell, he muttered. The bikers didn't enter the property. They were careful about that. They stayed on public land, on the street, in the parking area that served multiple businesses. Completely legal. But they were impossible to ignore. Massive signs went up. Gower Development refuses to pay workers. 17 lawsuits for wage theft. Ask Gower where the money went. And then, in a move that was pure theater, all 50 bikers revved their engines in unison. The sound was deafening, overwhelming, a wall of noise that made conversation impossible. Gower ran outside, his face red. You can't do this. This is private property. Jax, standing at the front of the group, smiled pleasantly. We're not on your property, Mr. Gower. We're on public land, exercising our First Amendment rights. I'll call the police. Please do, Jax said. I'd love to discuss our concerns with them too. The investors, confused and alarmed, were starting to drift toward their cars. This wasn't the refined, professional presentation they'd been promised. A news van pulled up. Keys had made sure Channel 7 knew about the protest at luxury development. A reporter and cameraman hopped out, immediately drawn to the spectacle. Gower paled. This was turning into a nightmare. Rook stepped forward, holding a folder of documents. Mr. Gower, we need to talk about Thomas Reed and the $8,000 you owe him. The police arrived 15 minutes later, 2 cars, for officers. Rook recognized one of them, Officer Patterson, who'd grown up in the neighborhood the grave walkers protected. What's going on here? Patterson asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Peaceful protest, Jack said calmly. We're on public property, we haven't threatened anyone, and we're raising awareness about wage theft. Gower pushed forward. They're harassing my business. They're scaring away my investors. Patterson looked at the signs, at the news camera now filming everything, at the 50 bikers standing calmly in formation. Are any of these men on your property, Mr. Gower? Well, no, but are they blocking traffic? Not technically, but have they made any threats or engaged in any violence? Gower's jaw worked. No, but this is clearly. Then this is a civil matter, Patterson said. And honestly, sir, if you owe this man money, you might want to consider paying it. He'd seen the signs too. 17 lawsuits. Wage theft. Patterson, who worked extra security jobs to make ends meet, didn't have much sympathy for wealthy developers who cheated workers. The news reporter approached Gower. Mr. Gower, can you comment on the allegations that you've refused to pay contractors for completed work? Gower's face went from red to purple. No comment. This is a private business matter. Is it true you've been sued 17 times? Those lawsuits were frivolous. If they were frivolous, why did you settle them? Gower looked around wildly. His investors were leaving. The news camera was rolling. The bikers were still there, a silent wall of judgment. What do you want? He finally hissed at Rook. Rook pulled out Thomas's contract and photos. We want you to pay Thomas Reed the $8,000 you owe him for 8 weeks of skilled carpentry work. We want you to pay it today, in cash or certified check. And we want you to make a donation to the local food bank, 1 month's supply of milk for every family they serve. That's extortion. No, Saracen said, stepping forward in her professional suit, looking every bit the lawyer she was. Extortion would be if we threatened harm. We're simply asking you to fulfill your contractual obligations while engaging in constitutionally protected speech. The donation to the food bank is optional, but it would show good faith. Gower looked at the news camera again, at the bikers, at his rapidly disappearing investors. Fine, he spat. I'll pay Reed. But this is the last. And the food bank donation, Jax added pleasantly. Fine. Whatever. Just get these people away from my property. Rook pulled out his phone and called Thomas, who was waiting at the clubhouse with Ellie. It's done. Gower's going to pay you today. Get down here. Thomas arrived 30 minutes later in his beat-up Honda, Ellie in the back seat. He looked terrified and hopeful in equal measure. Gower had retreated to his on-site office trailer, and he emerged with a checkbook, his hand shaking with suppressed rage. Sarah Chun was there to verify everything was legal and binding. $8,000, Gower said, writing the check with violent strokes. And we're done. I never want to see any of you again. Make it out to Thomas Reed, Sarah instructed. The check was handed over. Thomas stared at it like he couldn't believe it was real. $8,000. Enough to get an apartment. To buy food. To give Ellie a real home again. Thank you, he whispered, but he wasn't talking to Gower. And the food bank donation, Rook reminded. Let's say $1,000 worth of milk. Gower looked like he wanted to argue, but the news camera was still there, and the bikers hadn't left. He wrote another check, this one to the county food bank, marked for milk program. Are we done? He asked through gritted teeth. One more thing, Rook said. He pulled out a document Sarah had prepared. You're going to sign this agreement stating that you will never hire or do business with Thomas Reed again, not as punishment, but to ensure there's no future retaliation. And you're going to agree that if he ever has an issue with this payment, you'll cover his legal fees. It was protection, ensuring Gower couldn't come after Thomas once the bikers left. Gower signed it, his signature angry slashes across the paper. Now we're done, Jax said. Have a nice day, Mr. Gower. The bikers mounted their motorcycles and rode away in formation, the thunder of their engines a reminder that justice had been served. 2 weeks later, Rook pulled up to a modest apartment building on the east side. It wasn't fancy, just a basic 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood, but it was home. Thomas met him at the door, and the change was remarkable. He'd put on weight, the gauntness gone from his face. He'd shaved and gotten a haircut. He looked like a man again, not a ghost running from despair. "Rook," he said, shaking hands firmly. "Come in." The apartment was simply furnished, second-hand stuff mostly, but clean and comfortable. Children's toys were scattered on the living room floor. The kitchen smelled like dinner cooking. Ellie ran out from her bedroom, completely transformed from the sick, terrified child in the alley. She wore a bright pink dress and had a ribbon in her hair. "Mr. Rook," she shouted, launching herself at him. Rook caught her, surprised by the enthusiasm. "Hey there, kiddo. Feeling better? I have my own room," she announced proudly. "And Daddy got a new job. And we have milk in the fridge, lots of milk." "That's great," Rook said, genuinely smiling. Thomas looked embarrassed. "She's a little obsessed with milk now. I can't get her to drink anything else." They sat down, and Thomas explained how things had changed. The grave walkers had connected him with a custom furniture shop that needed skilled craftsmen. The owner had seen Thomas's work photos and hired him on the spot at $35 an hour, more than he'd been making before. "I start on Monday," Thomas said. "Full-time, with benefits. Health insurance for both of us." His voice cracked slightly. "I can take Ellie to a real doctor now." "Good," Rook said. "That's real good. I can never repay you for what you did," Thomas continued. "You saved our lives." "Literally." Rook shook his head. "You saved your own lives. You were doing everything you could to protect your daughter. We just even the odds a little." Ellie climbed into Rook's lap, something that surprised him even more. Kids usually found him intimidating. "Are you going to come visit us?" she asked. "Would you like that?" "Yes," she said firmly. "You're my friend. And friends visit." Rook looked at Thomas, who nodded with a smile. "You're always welcome here, Rook. You and your brothers. You gave us our life back." Later, as Rook prepared to leave, Ellie ran up with something in her hands. "I made you this," she said shyly. It was a drawing, done in crayon. A little girl and a tall man on a motorcycle. The sun was shining, and there were flowers. At the top, in careful letters, it said, "Thank you for saving my daddy." Rook felt that crack in his chest again, but this time it didn't hurt. It felt like something healing. "I'll hang this up at the clubhouse," he said seriously, "right where everyone can see it." Ellie beamed. Outside, Rook sat on his Harley for a moment before starting it up. He looked at the drawing again, at the simple happiness captured in crayon and paper. This was why the club existed. Not for the bikes or the leather or the reputation. For moments like this. For being able to look at yourself in the mirror and know you'd made things right. He carefully folded the drawing and tucked it into his jacket pocket, right over his heart. Then he started his bike and rode off into the autumn evening, the rumble of his engine carrying him home to his brothers, who would want to hear how Thomas and Ellie were doing. Behind him, in the lit window of the apartment, a little girl waved goodbye to her hero. And somewhere across town, Marcus Gower sat in his expensive office, writing checks to contractors he'd been planning to cheat, because he knew now that there were consequences, that the grave walkers were watching, that justice, sometimes, rode on 2 wheels and wore leather.